13.
Yes, sir.
You sound 12:30.
The document has already been signed. The ink has already dried. And by the time the world finds out what King Charles did behind the locked doors of Buckingham Palace, Queen Camilla's life will never be the same again. This is not a rumor circulating on social media. This is not a tabloid headline designed to grab attention for a single afternoon. This is a carefully sourced account of what sources close to the palace are now calling the most consequential internal decision King Charles III has made since ascending to the throne. A decision so calculated, so deliberate, and so devastating in its implications that even senior royal advisors were stunned when they learned the full scope of what had just transpired. A secret order, a signature, and a queen who woke up one morning holding every piece of power she had spent years building, only to discover that by nightfall, it had all been quietly, surgically, and permanently taken away. Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal will change everything you thought you knew about the state of the British royal family. And we promise you, the truth is far more shocking than anything you could have imagined. Setting the scene. To understand the full weight of what King Charles just did, you have to understand who Camilla Parker Bowles really became once the crown touched her head. For decades, she was the woman the British public despised, the third party in one of the most scrutinized marriages in modern history, the woman who stood in the shadow of Princess Diana. She endured the booing. She endured the cold shoulders of palace insiders. She endured the sharp daggers of public contempt, and she survived all of it, not through grace alone, but through something far more calculating: patience, strategy, and an extraordinary ability to wait. When Charles finally married her in April 2005, many believed it was the conclusion of a love story that had defied every obstacle the world could throw at it. And for a time, perhaps it was. Camilla played the role of supportive consort masterfully. She softened her public image. She embraced charitable causes. She allowed herself to be positioned as a steady, warm presence beside the future king. The British public, slowly but surely, began to warm to her. Then Charles became king, and everything changed. Because the moment the crown settled on Charles's head, the woman standing beside him apparently decided that a lifetime of waiting had earned her more than just a ceremonial role. According to sources familiar with palace dynamics, Queen Camilla began to view her position not merely as a symbolic one, but as a springboard toward genuine internal power. And she pursued that power with the quiet ferocity of someone who had spent 50 years being underestimated. Think about that for a moment. 50 years. Half a century of watching, waiting, learning exactly how every corridor of power inside the royal establishment operated. By the time she became queen, Camilla Parker Bowles arguably knew the internal architecture of that institution better than almost anyone alive, and she intended to use every single thing she had learned. But here is the question that the entire royal world is now asking: did she go too far? And more importantly, did King Charles just answer that question in the most dramatic way possible? The king's state of mind. Let us take you inside Buckingham Palace on the day the document was signed. It was a cold April morning, the kind of morning where the sky over London sits low and gray, pressing down on the city like a held breath. The tourists were already gathering outside the palace gates. The guards were performing their ceremonial routines with the mechanical precision that has not changed in generations. On the surface, everything was exactly as it always is. But behind those walls, in a private study lined with the weight of centuries, King Charles III sat, alone at his desk. And he was not thinking about public engagements. He was not reviewing his schedule for the week. He was staring at a document, a thick leather-bound internal directive, that his legal advisors had placed before him with the gravity of men who understood they were operating at the very edge of royal protocol. This was not legislation. It would not be debated in Parliament. It would not be announced at a press conference. There would be no velvet robes, no cameras, no gilded ceremony to mark the moment. This was something far more powerful and far more frightening than any of that. This was a private royal order, signed by the sovereign himself, designed to restructure the internal power mechanisms of the crown in a single irreversible stroke. The document before him contained specific clauses targeting something that Camilla had spent the better part of 2 years quietly building: control. Control over royal financial assets, control over the crown, estate resources, control over high-level personnel decisions within the palace. Control that, according to the king's own legal advisors, was unprecedented for a queen consort and deeply alarming to those who understood what it meant for the long-term stability of the institution. And here is the detail that matters most. This was not an impulsive decision. This was not the reaction of a sick, aging man making a rash choice in a moment of weakness. Multiple sources suggest that this move had been carefully prepared over months, in secrecy, in silence, and with the backing of individuals whose loyalty to the crown runs deeper than any personal feeling, individuals who carry Windsor blood in their veins, and the weight of succession on their shoulders. Charles picked up his pen. His hand, according to those present, was steady, his expression unreadable. The room was silent, except for the ancient ticking of the palace's antique clocks, counting down to a moment that would alter the British monarchy in ways the public would not fully understand for months, possibly years. He signed his name, and with that signature, Queen Camilla's world was dismantled. How Camilla built her empire. Before we go any further, we need to ask you something directly. Did you ever wonder why Camilla seemed so confident in those first months of Charles's reign? Why she appeared so composed, so strategically positioned at every major royal event? Why she seemed to have opinions, strong ones, about staffing, about resource allocation, about the direction of royal patronages? Because it was not an accident. None of it was. According to sources close to the palace, in the period following Charles's coronation, Camilla began a systematic and carefully disguised campaign to expand her footprint within the royal household. She did not do this openly. She did not hold press conferences announcing her intentions. She operated the way she has always operated, quietly, steadily, and with a patience that most people mistook for passivity. She began placing trusted allies in key positions within the palace structure. These were not dramatic appointments that would attract attention. They were small, administrative placements. A senior coordinator here, a scheduling advisor there, people who answered to her, people whose careers were tied to her continued influence, people who would ensure that her voice was heard in rooms where she was not physically present. She began involving herself in discussions about the royal family's investment portfolios, not loudly, not in ways that could be easily challenged, but persistently, raising questions, requesting briefings, inserting herself into conversations that, by tradition and protocol, were not within the purview of a queen consort. And then came the request that reportedly pushed Charles past the point of return. Camilla reportedly expressed a desire for direct control over the Duchy of Lancaster Fund, one of the most significant and private financial assets connected to the crown. According to royal legal advisors who were consulted at the time, this request was not only unprecedented, it was constitutionally inappropriate. A queen consort simply does not hold that kind of authority. It does not happen. It has never happened. And the very fact that the request was made, with what sources describe as considerable pressure, sent a chill through every senior advisor who heard it. For King Charles, a man who had watched his mother dedicate her entire existence to the service and protection of the institution she led, this was the moment that crossed a line he could not unsee. The alliance that changed everything. Here is where this story becomes extraordinary, because the king did not act alone. In the weeks before that document was signed, a series of quiet, private meetings took place in the northern corridors of Buckingham Palace. These were not the grand staterooms where the monarchy displays itself to the world. These were the smaller, more utilitarian spaces where real decisions are made, where the monarchy's unseen machinery actually operates. Present at these meetings were two individuals whose combined significance to the future of the British crown cannot be overstated. Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, the king's only sister, a woman whose reputation for straight-talking and iron loyalty to tradition is without equal in the modern royal family, and Prince William, the Prince of Wales, the heir apparent, the man who will one day carry the entire weight of this institution on his shoulders. Think about what it means that these two people found themselves in agreement. Princess Anne and Prince William do not operate from the same generational perspective. They do not always see the monarchy's challenges through the same lens. But on this issue, their understanding was reportedly immediate, total, and unanimous. The understanding between them, according to sources, was sealed not with long speeches or dramatic confrontations, but with a nod, a steady, knowing look that communicated everything that needed to be communicated. Both of them had been watching Camilla's movements within the palace with growing alarm. Anne, with the sharp instincts of a woman who has spent decades observing the inner workings of royal power, had noticed how Camilla conducted herself at official receptions. She had seen how strategically Camilla placed her loyalists in positions of administrative influence. She had recognized the pattern, and she had recognized the danger it represented, not to herself personally, but to the institution she had given her life to protecting. William, for his part, was motivated by something slightly different. He was not operating purely from a place of personal grievance or family politics. He was thinking about the future, about succession, about the stability that his grandmother had spent 70 years building, and that could be quietly eroded by ambitions that had no place in the calculus of the crown. He was thinking about what he would inherit, and what condition it would be in when he did. Together, they developed a plan, and it was breathtaking in its precision. The plan. There would be no confrontation, no scandal, no dramatic public move that would splash across every front page and force the palace into damage control mode. Instead, the plan was something far more elegant and far more devastating. A systematic restructuring of royal authority, disguised at every step as modernization. The departments and committees where Camilla had established influence would be quietly merged into new agencies, operating under the supervision of William and Catherine. The strategic meetings where she had previously occupied a central position would be replaced by specialized working groups, from which she was simply excluded. Not with fanfare, but with the cold efficiency of an organizational chart revision. Every change would be wrapped in the language of administrative optimization, efficiency, reform, modernization of the royal apparatus for the 21st century. Language so dry, so technical, so bureaucratically unremarkable that no outside observer would immediately connect it to what was actually happening, which was the deliberate, methodical dismantling of one individual's power base within the most famous institution on Earth. The final draft of the internal directive, the document that would eventually land on Charles's desk, was precise in its language. Queen Camilla's role would be formally restricted to charitable activities and ceremonial duties. Her ability to intervene in investment fund decisions would be eliminated. Her authority over high-level staffing appointments would be revoked. Every thread of administrative influence she had spent 2 years weaving would be cut, and, the most chilling part, it was designed to leave no trace of a power struggle. There would be no decree that read like a punishment, no announcement that sounded like a removal. It was constructed to look, from the outside, like a natural evolution of royal governance. Clean, seamless, impossible to effectively challenge without appearing to be exactly what Camilla was, someone reaching for power that was never rightfully hers to begin with. Camilla feels the walls close in. Now, here is where we want you to pause for a second. We want you to genuinely consider what this must have felt like from Camilla's perspective. Imagine spending 50 years working toward a position, surviving public hatred, outlasting every criticism, finally arriving at the pinnacle, the title, the palace, the crown. And then one morning, you notice something is slightly off. A meeting has been postponed. An invitation you expected hasn't arrived. A member of staff who always greeted you warmly suddenly seems to find reasons to look elsewhere when you pass. This is precisely what began happening to Camilla in the weeks following the plan's quiet implementation. The board meeting of a strategic charity fund she had long chaired was postponed, indefinitely, for what a terse notification described as administrative restructuring. No phone call, no personal explanation, no acknowledgement of the years she had invested in that role. Just a notification on a tablet screen, sitting on a marble dressing table in a palace room that was starting to feel less and less like home. At private diplomatic dinners and internal meetings, the invitations stopped coming. In their place arrived memoranda, sent after events had already concluded, summarizing decisions that Camilla should have been part of making. She was being briefed on outcomes instead of being consulted on processes. The difference between those two things is the difference between power and its absence. Staff members who had previously offered her warm greetings in the corridors suddenly became inexplicably busy whenever she appeared. They veered into side passages. They buried themselves in paperwork. They avoided her eyes with the careful, deliberate avoidance of people who have been quietly instructed to create distance without ever having to explain why. And then came the moment that reportedly shattered her composure completely. Camilla was passing the state drawing room, a space she had considered within her domain of influence, when she saw through the doorway something that stopped her cold. William and Catherine, seated with representatives of the Crown Estate, reviewing the very documents and portfolios that Camilla had been fighting to control just weeks earlier. Catherine, elegant and composed, receiving briefings with the natural authority of someone who belonged in that chair. The transfer of power was happening so organically, so smoothly, that it barely looked like a transfer at all. It looked like order being restored. The confrontation. Something had to break, and eventually it did. On a late afternoon when the setting sun painted the windows of Buckingham Palace a blazing, almost aggressive red, Queen Camilla reached her limit. The weeks of cold shoulders, canceled meetings, vanished invitations, and strategic silences had pushed her past the point of aristocratic composure. She moved rapidly down the corridor toward the king's private study, her heels striking the wooden floor with the sharp rhythm of someone who has decided that enough is enough. She pushed open the heavy oak doors without waiting for the private secretary's customary announcement. What she found inside stopped her. King Charles sat by the window, completely still, as if he had been expecting her. Perhaps he had. The contrast between her barely contained fury and his absolute glacial calm created an atmosphere that sources describe as almost unbearable in its intensity. She demanded answers. She demanded an explanation for the dissolution of everything she had built. She demanded to know what was happening to her place in the institution she had stood beside for decades. Charles slowly turned to face her, and his eyes, the eyes of a man she had known for most of her adult life, held something she had never seen directed at her before. Not anger, not guilt, not the indulgent affection that had always softened his expression when he looked at her. Instead, there was a cold, clear-eyed distance, the look of someone who has made a decision they will not reverse and feels no obligation to justify. Without speaking, he pushed a thin folder across the edge of the desk toward her. She picked it up, she read it, and as her eyes moved across each clause, each carefully worded provision stripping her of access, of authority, of financial oversight, of administrative influence, the color reportedly drained from her face. This was not a draft. This was not a proposal being floated for discussion. This was signed. This was done. This was real. And then Charles produced the letter that completed the picture, a document bearing the signatures of Princess Anne and Prince William. The two names side by side beneath the restructuring proposal told Camilla everything she needed to know. She was not merely facing a dissatisfied husband. She was facing a united front, a coordinated, sophisticated defense system built around the monarchy by the people who will carry it into the future. The realization, by all accounts, was devastating. She had been outmaneuvered, completely, on every level. While she had been focused on expanding her influence, the people around her had been quietly, methodically building a fortress. And she had not seen it coming because she had never believed that Charles, the man who had defied the entire world to be with her, would be the one to lead the charge against her. The aftermath and what it means. In the days that followed, Queen Camilla's withdrawal from the center of royal life was swift and, above all, silent. Expensive luggage was packed without the usual retinue of attendants. Silk gowns were folded by her own hands. Jewels that once felt like symbols of triumph now reportedly felt cold and heavy to the touch. Beautiful objects that had somehow become the artifacts of a story that was already over. She retreated to her private home in Wiltshire, seeking the quiet of countryside gardens that asked nothing of her and offered nothing in return except distance. Her absence at public royal events immediately created a visible gap. The diplomatic receptions where the Queen's presence had been an automatic expectation were now attended by Princess Anne, steady and composed, filling the space with a different kind of royal authority. At no point did Buckingham Palace issue a formal explanation. There were no press releases, no carefully worded statements acknowledging a change in the Queen's role, just the quiet geometry of a new arrangement settling into place. Meanwhile, at the center of royal visibility, William and Catherine stepped forward with the measured confidence of people who have been waiting for exactly this moment. They began appearing at the strategic patronages that Camilla had once coveted. They received the briefings. They led the commemorative ceremonies. At a major event at Westminster Abbey, it was William and Catherine who led the procession. Their youth, their composure, their palpable sense of purpose, serving as a living statement about where the monarchy's future actually lives. And King Charles, walking with a composure that had reportedly been absent from his bearing for months, watched his son lead the way and felt something that sources describe as the closest thing to peace he had experienced in a long time. Because despite the pain of it, and make no mistake, those close to the king insist that the personal cost of this decision was enormous. He knew he had done the right thing. He had chosen the institution over the individual, the future over the familiar, the crown over the comfort of a love story. The deeper question. Now we need to stop and ask you something, and we want you to think carefully before you answer, either in your own mind or in the comments below where we genuinely want to hear from you. Was Camilla wrong? Not in the binary tabloid sense of that question, not simply bad person or good person, but genuinely, was she wrong to pursue influence? Was she wrong to want security? Was she wrong to use the position she had earned through decades of public punishment to build something lasting for herself within the institution that had once treated her as an outsider? Because here is the uncomfortable truth at the heart of this story. Camilla Parker Bowles entered the royal family as one of its most despised figures. She spent years being treated as though she did not belong, as though her presence was an insult. She was booed in public. She was excluded from official portraits. She was managed and minimized and made to feel repeatedly that her position was conditional on the goodwill of people who had never wanted her there. Is it so surprising that when she finally reached the top, she wanted to ensure that her position could not be taken away? Is she a villain who allowed ambition to corrupt a love story? Or is she a woman who had learned, through hard, painful, humiliating experience, that in the world of the British monarchy, nothing is guaranteed to anyone? That titles can be withdrawn, positions can be restructured, and the people you love most can turn the machinery of institutional power against you without a single public announcement. We are not here to tell you how to feel about Camilla. What we are here to tell you is that the story is more complicated than any headline can capture, and the person sitting alone in a Wiltshire countryside home, staring out at fields that make no demands and offer no power, is a woman whose story is not yet finished. What happens next? The British monarchy has, throughout its history, demonstrated a remarkable and sometimes ruthless ability to absorb internal convulsions and present an unbroken face to the world. It has survived abdications. It has survived divorces and scandals and tragedies that would have destroyed lesser institutions. It is extraordinarily good at making its internal earthquakes invisible to everyone standing outside its walls. But this situation is different, because the people involved are still here. King Charles is still king. Camilla is still technically queen. She has not been publicly stripped of her title. The palace has made no announcement. And that careful management of appearances creates its own set of questions that will not go away simply because no one at Buckingham Palace is answering them. What happens the next time there is a major state occasion? What happens when the cameras are pointing at the royal family and the question of where Camilla stands, literally, physically in the procession becomes impossible to manage without someone noticing? What happens when international dignitaries arrive expecting to be received by the king and queen, and the queen is conspicuously absent or conspicuously diminished? And perhaps most importantly, what does Camilla do next? Because the woman who spent 50 years playing a long game has not suddenly lost the capacity for strategic thinking. She is not destroyed. She is not finished. She is recalibrated, forced by the sudden removal of institutional power to find a different way to exist within an institution that has just demonstrated it can move against her without warning or apology. The next chapter of this story has not been written yet, and that, if you have been paying attention, is exactly what should concern you most. The legacy of this moment. When historians look back at the reign of King Charles III, and they will, with the particular intensity they reserve for monarchs who presided over moments of genuine institutional transformation, the signing of this document will likely be identified as one of the defining decisions of his kingship, not because it was the most dramatic moment of his reign, but because of what it reveals about who Charles actually is when he is forced to choose between the personal and the institutional, between the man and the monarch, between the husband and the king. For most of his adult life, Charles was characterized by the public and the press as someone who allowed his personal feelings to override his institutional obligations. The affair with Camilla, the decision to pursue her despite every opposition the establishment could mount, the choice, repeated across decades, to prioritize what his heart wanted over what his position demanded. He was seen for a long time as a man who was not entirely suited to the severe requirements of the role he was born into. This decision suggests something very different. This decision suggests that King Charles III, whatever else may be said about him, understands, at the deepest level, what the crown requires, and he is willing to pay the price it demands, even when that price is measured in the currency of personal pain, even when the person on the other side of the equation is the woman he spent his entire life fighting to be with. That is not the act of a weak king. That is not the act of a man who cannot separate his personal life from his public duty. That is the act of someone who has finally, fully, and irrevocably become what he was always supposed to be. Here is where we leave you, And here is where we genuinely want to hear from you. King Charles has signed a secret internal order. Queen Camilla has been stripped of the real power she spent years building inside Buckingham Palace. Princess Anne and Prince William were the architects of the plan, and the British monarchy has, once again, demonstrated its extraordinary capacity for ruthlessness in the service of self-preservation. But we want to know what you think, not what the tabloids think, not what the palace is saying, because the palace, as usual, is saying nothing. What do you think? Is King Charles a decisive monarch who made the hardest call of his reign to protect the institution he inherited? Or is he a man who, after 50 years of choosing Camilla over everyone and everything, ultimately proved that the crown always wins? That even a love story powerful enough to reshape the monarchy can be ended with the stroke of a pen behind closed doors? And what about Camilla? In your view, does she deserve the sympathy of someone who was always treated as an outsider and simply tried to build security for herself? Or does she deserve the consequences of someone who confused a position earned through love with a mandate for power? Drop your thoughts in the comments right now. This is a conversation worth having, and we read every single response. If this story moved you, if it surprised you, disturbed you, or made you look at the British royal family differently, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to understand what is actually happening behind the palace walls, and subscribe, because the royal story is moving faster than any of us anticipated, and we are going to be here for every single development as it unfolds. The next video is already waiting for you on your screen. Click it now, because what comes next in this story is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss. The ink is dry, the document is signed, and the British monarchy will never be quite the same again.